Hold on. In today's episode of Spectacle Program on TVN, we shall be analyzing challenges faced in ministerial portfolios by few of the retained ministers in their first appointment and what to expect from them in this second term. I am your host, Daniel Atai, and remember that Spectacle is open for sponsorship for your socio-political and economic achievements such as scorecards, personal or professional profiles, visions of aspirations and blueprints. We tell it to the world for you. Of course, Spectacle today is also for audience participation. Call and text via the telephone numbers that will be displayed shortly on the screen. However, I have analysts in the studio with me that will be doing justice to the topic on discussion. Of course, first by my right is Reginald Nabwe. Of course, Reginald is the chairman of Different Approach Development Foundation and CEO of Sagaso Worldwide Ghana Limited. He is also a facilitator of the Africa Industrial Revolution. Also, I have with me by my left side, Comrade Dominic Alancha in the studio. Alancha, you are welcome to Spectacle.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, Dominic Alancha is the Special Assistant on Youth and Civil Society Organization to the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, Mr. Reginald, ministers have been given portfolio, and then, of course, 14 of them retained, and out of the 14 retained, 2 were retained in their former portfolios. Of course, you know that Mr. President took time, to name his ministers, his cabinet, and then a while to give us their, respective portfolios. You have any reaction to that effect?
Thank you very much for having me today. I believe very strongly that the phase that we have gotten to in governance now is a serious phase where those who have been given the privilege to serve as ministers will have to show a great reason. Will have to prove that there was no mistake in their appointments, especially those who were retained as ministers in this new cabinet. Because if you look at it, I believe very strongly that with the advent of the industrial revolution that is going on in the country.
Yeah, hold on, Mr. Reginald. I'll be with you shortly. But before we go on this short break, I know you stopped right now. So we're talking about 14 ministers, reappointed from the former, while 18 others were not. After a while, I'll get back to you. Our audience participatory numbers will be given to you shortly after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Before we went on that short break, we were talking about the topic on discussion and, of course, the challenges and what to expect from the ministerial portfolio of this very cabinet that Mr. President have inaugurated. And expectedly, 12 of the 14 ministers from the last cabinet were returned to serve in their previous posts. The only two returning ministers not retained in their previous positions are Mustafa Baba Shehuri, who was previously State Minister of Power, Works and Housing, is now the Minister of State, Agric and Rural Development, and Osagi Enahire, now a substantive health minister, but was previously the Minister of State for Health. Of course, let us look at the promises made in 2015 by some of the 12 ministers retained on their previous portfolios that formed their challenges. Of course, not one of them is Ogbonnaya Onu. Ogbonnaya Onu, of course, was the first elected governor of Old Abia State in 1991. He was appointed Minister of Science and Technology in 2015. Though he had great ideas to promote homegrown technology in all agencies under the ministry, the lack of follow-up and implementation and accountability appeared to be the major challenges that led to his little achievement in that ministry. Most of his promises are yet to be achieved. Example, he promised creating 400,000 jobs through pencil production. Of course, he said that before 2019. Perhaps he was reappointed again in the same ministry to achieve that. Or what is your take? And like we said, the program is open for discussion. You can call in via the phone numbers displayed on your screen. However, this time, Ogbonnaya is assisted by a Minister of State for Science and Technology, Mr. Muhammadu Abdullahi. Reginald,
yes,
we're talking about the retainership of
yes.
these
the
12
ministers.
ministers. And of course, they had challenges from their first tenure.
Yes.
So what do you have to say about that?
Like I was saying, you see, it's I think like we have to congratulate them, all of them that have been retained in their various ministries.
Congratulations to all of you.
Yes.
Distinguished ministers.
And then you see, I believe very strongly that the reason why the president had to go to this line was because of continuity.
Yeah.
You see, sometimes the time frame given for a people to actualize their vision, because you see, the infrastructure of Nigeria seems to have gone back as a result of the closure of our industries.
Yeah.
Like I keep saying that the reason why we are where we are is because we closed down our industries. Like you mentioned, Ogbonnaya, talking about creating 400,000 jobs.
Yeah, from the Ministry of Science and Technology. He said through pencil production.
Yes.
I heard him say that.
That is the path that we must do. Every minister must walk towards the path of creating jobs. And the only way you create jobs from your ministry is that you have to encourage local content.
But he had 4 years, and that never happened.
That is the reason, I believe that is the reason why you see today that the president must have seen. There must have been reasons. I believe that the president wouldn't have retained any minister if he has not seen some measure of progress in certain programs that such ministers have set in motion in the first 4 years. So as a result of that, I strongly believe that in these last 4 years, that some of the programs will see the light of day. You know, no structure ever built is ever built a day. If you must go high, you must go down very, very, very deep down. The skyscraper, the determining factor of how high the structure is going to go is how deep it went. And during the times of the depth, you don't see anything at the surface.
It's okay.
Yes, sir.
I'll come back to you again. Mr. Dominic Alancha, today you are a special advisor at the National Assembly, the House of Rep. Precisely. What do you see wrong with the ministerial cabinet, the portfolios? Do we have square pegs in square holes?
Well, thank you very much for having me on this program. First, let me join my voice with the voice of other Nigerians in congratulating all the 43 inaugurated ministers.
44 because Mr. President is among.
Yeah, 44. So congratulations. The question is, what do I see wrong? I see nothing wrong in this appointment. I think for me it's a perfect one. Like you said, it's a square peg in a square hole, or a round
peg in a round hole.
You know. So I think that it's a very wonderful appointment. For most of us, we're excited with the appointment. We are happy with the appointment. And for those that have been returned as ministers, those that have been retained, I think it went further to, to buttress the confidence that Mr. President have in them in terms of their performance rating.
Okay.
If you look at them individually in terms of their performance, you see that they have performed excellently well, and that is what earned them the second time.
All right, I'll get back to you still on them. I just want us to have a brief background of these persons. We just talked about Ogbonna Onu, and the second on my list is Adamo Adamo. Adamo Adamo is the Minister of Education. And of course, Adamo Adamo was a columnist for Media Trust before his first appointment as Education Minister in 2015. While Mr. Adamo was reappointed as Education Minister, his state counterpart was replaced with Emeka Nwajoba. Of course, Adamo promised in 2015 to reduce Nigeria's out-of-school children by half before the end of his tenure in 2019, a promise that never came to pass. Perhaps another reason for reappointing him. And of course, we have Hadi Sirika. Hadi Sirika, of course, the Minister of Aviation, and of course, he's a pilot and a former senator from Katsina State. He was a former lawmaker in both lower and upper chambers. One reason he was asked by the senators to take a bow and go during their inauguration and screening. And of course, appointed Minister of Aviation in 2015, Mr. Sirika, aged 55 years, is known for bearing his mind against ownership of private aircraft through corrupt means. However, domestic flight operations declined under his watch because of inadequate facilities at some of the airports, which resulted to low passengers traffic most of the times. Of course, high cases of delayed flights were also recorded in his first term in charge of aviation, a good reason why perhaps he was scored low, scored within average by some analysts and experts. Today is returned again as Minister of Aviation to correct the ease. Of course, we also have Mr. Chibuike Amechi. Chibuike Amechi is the Minister of Transportation, of course, a former 2 terms governor of Rivers State and the Director General of President Muhammadu Buhari's re-election campaign in 2019. Several controversies trailed him, one of which was a purported audio recording released by the PDP in January, where he was quoted saying that Nigerians were hungry and poverty has been growing under President Buhari. He won the hearts of Nigerians with the revamping of the railway system anyway, and of course the coaches he introduced, hence was called a little above average. Mr. Amechi was also reappointed to serve in the Ministry of Transportation without the aviation segment. Of course, another minister we'll look at again is Mohamedou Bello. Bello returned, had raised controversies, especially among residents of the Federal Capital Territory, because he was the minister in charge of the FCT. Of course, people lamented that Abuja is gradually a sharp contrast of its original plan under Mr. Bello as FCT minister. And his administration seemingly turned a blind eye as infrastructure and public utilities in the city, of course, went deteriorated. However, he was returned as FCT minister. Nonetheless, a Minister of State, Ramatu Tijani, has been assigned to assist him, and I think this time, credibly, he will perform well. We will not forget in a hurry, Babatunde Fashola, the one that was a minister in charge of power and works and housing attached, into his portfolio. He was a 2-term Lagos State ex-governor, reappointed as Minister of Works and Housing, but that of power segment of his previous portfolio was removed this time. President Buhari's decision to take out the power ministry from Mr. Fashola did not come as a surprise to keen observers. In fact, merging the three important ministries under one minister has proved to be a Herculean task towards a successful lighting up Nigeria. Mr. Fashola did not arguably consolidate his performance as governor of Lagos State in his first stint as a minister, especially in the power sector. We'll come to that. Now, you said they performed credibly well, and what I have, the indices I have about some of them, their performance, their promises were not kept.
offline television programming. Situated in the serene environment of Guzape, Abuja FCT, TVN, as it is fondly called, caters to a wide variety of audience via carefully orchestrated mind-blowing programs in the areas of fashion, business, politics, entertainment, religion, movies, food and health, culture and lifestyle, events around the globe, sports, and foreign news. Whatever your inclination, we've got you completely covered with programs like Issues of the Moment, The Patriot, Daybreak Nigeria, Matter Africa, TVN Business Time, Healthy Living, From the Cradle, Stay Inspired, Entertainment Gist, Movie Hour.
Guys, for that breaking transmission due to little technical fault in the studio. And like we were saying, we are still talking about the challenges and expectations from the ministerial portfolio of the cabinet of President Muhammadu Buhari. Some of their challenges, of course, in 2015, you saw them not keeping few of their promises, especially promises that made them, ministers in 2015.
Well, like I said, I do not know the yardstick you use in
the out-of-school student for Adamu that you
their
were
rating.
talking about.
But talking about out-of-school children, in 2014, I think the rating or the data that was available for us at that time was that over 14 million children are out of school. But I can tell you that from 2015 till date, we have, drastically reduced that number through some of the social interventions programs that have been introduced. Yeah. So anybody that said that Adamu did not keep to his promise or did not fulfill that mandate, I think he may be wrong. Now, coming to Amechi has performed credibly well.
Yeah, Amechi
like you rightly said,
yes.
He won the heart of Nigerians by revamping the railway stations.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
So we cannot really, in terms of Amechi's performance, I can't find any loopholes where I can say he has not done
Amechi
credibly
and Lai
well.
Mohammed.
But that is not to say that they cannot do more, and perhaps that's why Mr. President have to reappoint them because of their performance in order to do more. Mr. President, I'm privileged to this information that he believes in continuity. He said it earlier.
Yeah.
You understand? And one of the problem we are having in terms of infrastructural development is lack of continuity. Look, Itape Warri Rail started over 32 years ago. Over 32 years ago. But when did complete? I'm telling you, by this regime, train will begin to apply that route. Itakpe, Kogilokoja, Itakpe, Wariru.
We had a situation.
These are some of the issues, that Mr. President considered and brought them back. And most of the ministers, to be honest and to be fair with them, they perform credibly well, especially those that have been returned. There are those that are not also returned that didn't perform well, that performed well but were not returned. But of course, those are the political dynamics that we may look at another day.
It's okay. Looking at Fashola's, the power segment removed from his portfolio. Is now on housing and works and housing. Even at works and housing, there are some states. I remember Mr. President talked about across the 36 states of the nation that federal roads, maintenance through FEMA and so on, what have you, must be carried out appropriately, that he wouldn't want to see potholes on Nigerian roads. The inception of President Muhammad Buhari, I have him on tape. And we saw Fashola, of course, in Benue of recent, before the 2019 presidential election. He came to a commission to flag off a road unit from Otupo to Makurdi. And that road was said to have been awarded since 2011, and in 2016 we also heard that from the National Assembly, where the National Assembly made us to understand that the contractors even abscond with the fund, and therefore Mr. President have to re-award that particular road. Now, he flew helicopter down to that place, we believe that road will be done by now. As we speak, the road, like many other roads in Nigeria, are still, under dilapidation. What do you have to say about his scorecard in the Works Ministry?
I want to start with power, let's go back a little bit. Power.
Okay.
He was power minister, and I really want to commend Fashola a bit, because since I returned to Nigeria, I have noticed, I've been here in Abuja here for close to about 2 months plus now.
Okay.
And when I came in, I noticed that the light wasn't as stable as it is today.
Okay.
Now, and I want to say very, very importantly that it is important that we understand that in this 21st century, Nigeria has nothing to do with darkness.
Okay.
Now, and secondly, I believe that some of the reasons why the level of productivity, the level of achievement of goals set by these ministers, we expect that we should have had more successes.
Yeah.
Is because till now, presently, most of our leaders don't understand that whenever opportunity of leadership is given, it is given in lieu of the future opportunities that will exist. Now, if you focus as a leader in today's appointment, and then you were able to perform, like he said, they can perform better. They can perform better.
Okay.
Which is what we demand. We demand better performance. We demand, there's no reason why, with the investments that have been made into the power sector, there is no reason why we shouldn't have stable electricity. And that I keep saying, there is an industrial revolution that is taking place in Nigeria right now, which many of us are not looking at very, very well. And because of these industries, we need constant electricity.
Yeah.
And look at it, all the geopolitical zones of Nigeria, the 6 zones, we have different resources that can power the nation. Some parts of the country we have solar, some parts of the country we have wind, some parts of the country we have the hydraulic, like we have in Shiroro and all that. Are you getting me?
Yeah.
Then you look at Enugu, you have coal. You look at gas flare in the southern part of Nigeria. All those are avenues by which we can sustain, we can supply, we can produce, supply, and sustain our electricity for the industrial revolution.
Okay.
And now, remember, secondly, another thing I want to say is that each of the portfolios have opportunities for job creation.
Yeah.
We must pursue job creation as a means. It is actually the only means we have to move ourselves out of poverty.
Okay.
And which means we have to pursue local content all ministers, all current ministers, new ministers, old past ministers must look at local content from their own ministry's perspective, from the perspective of their ministries. Because if it is not local content, then you're not the change that we're looking at is not going to come.
In a nutshell, the power sector have been removed from him and given to Maman. What is that his name? Saleh Mama from Taraba State. And
the housing.
The power sector.
Yes.
Now, do you think this new Minister of State will have the capacity to revamp the
capacity is not a question. All of us in Nigeria, we have capacity, but the question is, do we have the will? And are we dedicated in doing what we have decided, what we have capacity for? Because you can have capacity, but if you are distracted, if you're not focused in pursuing the achievement of your capacity, at the end of the day, you have nothing to show for it.
All right.
Let me just quickly come in at this juncture. If you look at the profile of Saleh Mama, you believe with me, you agree with me that he has the capacity to move Nigeria from the present 7,000 megawatts, that Nigeria have to 10,000 that we are targeting by the year 2020. So he has the capacity, and that is even his field. One of the
so it's a square peg in a square hole.
Exactly, it is his field. So we will
like
hold
the
them,
aviation minister.
Exactly. So we will hold them accountable if they fail to perform. You understand? There is no excuse this time around, and that is what the ministers need to understand. The Nigerians are looking up to them to perform. Nigerians are not looking up to them to give them excuses. There is no time for excuses. So somebody like Saleh Maman, he has the capacity, he has the political will, you understand, given his antecedents in the past, to move Nigeria from the current 7,000 megawatts that we are enjoying.
Good. You might be enjoying this 7,000 megawatt, like you said, but at the rural areas, governance have really become a quagmire, especially the issue of power at the rural areas. If we could extend electricity supply even for 3 good hours at the rural communities, rural electrification, I believe there will be production in some of these artisans and people who have employed themselves. So when you talk about moving from 7,000 megawatts to whatever, we have been having so many megawatts and time to
the challenges. The challenges
we're talking about implementation.
Yes, the challenges we have in some of those areas is the aspect of infrastructure. You understand? Some rural areas are not connected to certain grids, and that got to do with the infrastructure. We're also looking up to them to provide such infrastructure so that the rural areas will begin to enjoy, some of these powers, power supply that we're enjoying in the city. But look, let me tell you, if you go to the rural area, take for example, Kefi Akwanga Road, you see, people selling yam with light with electricity light, hot afternoon. You understand? That means they are enjoying the steady light. Go to my village in Okpoga. You understand? We have light in Uboklo. There is light.
No.
You understand? If you are talking about interiors, the challenges is not about, the challenges is about the infrastructure that will take some of this light down there. So I think they need to do more, and that is the responsibility. Well, they are under him, Rural Electrification Commission. You understand?
Because now the power has been removed from Fashola, believed to have been given to a more competent, state minister.
Exactly.
So we wouldn't have any excuse.
We wouldn't have excuse.
Of course, even before you come into that power issue. Power is life. Just like we know water is also life. That sector is in charge of productivity. You are an industrialist. And I want you to talk more about rural electrification, how possible, because we have certain during Abacha time we have Vision 2010, Obasanjo came Vision 2020, Vision this, Vision that. So what is actually the problem?
I want to say this to you. See, infrastructure is a product of industrialization. Industrialization is not a product of infrastructure. Now, like you said, the reason why we don't have we seem to think that we don't have electricity in the rural area, which I also beg to disagree. In fact, our rural areas have more electricity than our urban cities. I explain. If you go back to the villages, or majority of the villages, except those ones, like you said, who are not in the national grid for now, you will discover that they have more electricity than us who are living inside the urban cities.
Well,
and then secondly, sir, let me explain something to you.
Yeah.
I believe that Nigeria should pursue rural urbanization. And let me explain what I mean by that. Okay. Our natural resources are in our rural areas. And if we decide to go about processing, because you see, we need to stop the export of our natural resources. We must stop selling orange and start selling orange juice. We must stop selling, potato and start selling.
The Minister of Trade and Investment is hearing.
Yes.
And now, the Minister of Mines and Mineral Resources is hearing.
What we need to do is that we need to move the factories to the rural areas, because you see, what attracts electricity is consumption. And if we have reasons for consumption in our rural areas, the electricity will go straight to our rural areas. And then, like I keep saying, they have said to us that electricity is our problem, that's why we are not industrializing. But that is not true. We have MTN, we have some of the biggest organizations or businesses in Nigeria, and they are running their businesses in Nigeria, and they are succeeding. Now, but you see, the electricity problem, our rural areas have to be converted. It has to become, our industrialization has to go back to the rural areas. If it does go back to the rural areas, what will happen is that our rural areas will turn to urban cities, and that will reduce the migration of people from the rural areas to the urban cities, and the clustering of the urban cities. And like you said, another thing we also need to also consider when it comes to the issue of housing, which I want to talk about a little bit.
Yes.
We have to see, housing has transformed. These days, they build houses in weeks. They can build thousands of houses because majority of housing programs now are prefabricated.
Okay. So it means we can have low housing scheme for the poor.
Yes, we can have. We can have.
Because Abuja, you have the rate of rent in Abuja is alarming.
It's because of the technology that we are still applying. We are still applying the mortar and brick. Mortar and brick is not the technology of housing today. It's not easy to meet the demand. Are you getting me? But all these things, we must look back to our rural areas. Our rural areas has to become our playing ground of industry.
Like urban scheme housing.
Yes, we need to make sure that we go back to our industries, our machines. We don't have to be taking the resources from the urban areas and bringing them into the cities. We need to take the machines back to the rural areas and put them there and create the jobs there. And you will discover that everybody will just stay back in his
All right. Okay, that is the duties. Will be the duty of the ministers. And Mr. Dominica Lancha, the Minister of Youth, today, has been shifted from Dalong to Sunday Dari at far away Oyo State. Now, what is your expectation? You are a mobilizer for the youth integration in Nigeria today.
Well, my expectation.
Of course, you know that judging from the unemployment rate of the youth and so on.
Exactly. Well, Minister of Youth and Sport, I think he has so much to do in terms of harnessing the potentials of young people, in this country, and that is something that is lacking. We talked about something before we come on live with my good friend here, yes, about sport creations. You understand? You go to our estate, you go to our local schools. There are no more sporting facilities that will bring out these potentials in young people. Yes. Where I schooled back then in the 90s, 80s and the 90s, in my secondary school we have a very good field. We have track event where we have my children today don't know shot put. They don't know javelin. Yes. They don't know discus. Yes. You understand? Handball, they don't know. Volleyball, basketball. We have all these facilities in school back in the 80s and the 90s.
Are this going to still be the challenges he's going to face? Or
no. Yeah, these are the challenges that the Ministry of Youth and Sport is already facing. And the confidence Mr. President have in him, in bringing him back, is because of his track record, even in Ministry of, in NCC, as the Executive Commissioner on stakeholders management.
Okay.
He performed excellently well. There are so many youth programs that he has sponsored, he has financed, under the ministry as a result of his position. And I believe that Sunday Dare will perform excellently well. They are just coming on board. He has read his, he gave a speech the other day, and it was quite motivating.
It's okay.
Yes.
All right. I think we will stop here for today, but we will still be, beaming our satellite on these personalities, these ministers, especially the portfolios given to them. We have talked about few. We'll be exploring others as we continue, in this particular program, and probably I will have a cause to invite both of you again for continuity of this particular topic.
Thank you.
However, the ministers have been given portfolios, and what we expect them to do now is to hit the ground running and put smiles on Nigerians, the faces of Nigerians, and as well implement projects that will be palliative measures for the hardship Nigerians are facing at the moment. We do know that economy is very difficult to rebuild. The revamping process is what we are passing through. Now, the appointment and reappointment and the retainership of these ministers and their portfolios should pave way for development of infrastructure and amenities for Nigerians. This is where we'll stop today on Spectacle program, and of course next time when we come, we'll still throw it open for you for discussion and your participation. Thank you once again. I'm your host, Daniel Atai.